I just wanted to touch on real quick a little bit about the differences between the default Python implementation in Maya and the PyMel implementation. As I mentioned on the thread, the Python implementation is generally not considered very Pythonic. It was all done procedurally, so like basically they just had a bit of code that converted Mel, wrapped it in Python, and then the way you interact with it is still very much kind of Mel-esque, kind of functional. Whereas Python, being object-oriented, really favors an object-oriented approach. So then people made PyMel, which is a little bit more object-oriented. So here I just have a little demo script. You can see here I'm just going to be importing the Maya commands module and the PyMel core. Then we're going to make a sphere. So making a sphere, as you've noticed, is pretty much the same. The only difference is we're using Maya commands instead of the PyMel core. Let's go ahead and create these two spheres that are right on top of each other. And we start to see a little bit of a difference here when we go to move those spheres. So for the normal Python, it's basically going to be very similar to Mel. There's a couple ways to do it, but here I'm just going to use xform, give it the sphere I want, and then tell it the position in 3D space. And then for PyMel, instead what we're doing is actually using the setAttr method from PyMel, giving it that sphere node and just telling it to set the translate x. So here we've got the sphere. Actually, let's take a look and see what was returned here. We've got the command. Notice how these are Unicode strings for two different nodes that live in Maya. And here, this is actually a PyMel object. So it's a code object. If you haven't gotten too much into object-oriented programming, you can kind of think of it like a Maya object. So a sphere in Maya has attributes, translate, rotate, scale, all that kind of stuff. A code object is kind of the same thing. It is a collection of attributes and methods to interact with that object. So here we have a transform object that contains the Unicode string pmsphere, and we have a polysphere object that has the name of that node in there as well. Cool. Let's go ahead and adjust this. So we've got the PyMel sphere. We're going to be moving it based on that transform node. So that's going to be the first one right there. Just take that, run it. That shovels it off to the side. All right. So now let's go ahead and adjust the radius on these. So for straight Python, you have to call the polysphere method from the commands, from the Maya commands module. Feed it which node you want to deal with. In this case, we're just going to feed it the return. Tell it that we want to edit it, and then tell it the value that we want to edit. And then for PyMel, we're going to be leveraging that same setAttr command again. This time, though, instead of functioning on the transform node, the index 0 of the return value there, we're going to be affecting the polysphere node. And basically, you're just saying that node dot radius, and then you give it the value. So this is going to be like the first, I guess the second kind of look at kind of object orientation. So instead of telling it specifically like this object, this node, you can just go this object's attribute, do the thing. Cool. Let's go ahead and look at querying that. So the same kind of thing. For the Maya commands, you have to call the polysphere method, feed it the object you want, tell it you want to know what, you want to know something from it, and then tell it what you want to know. I'm going to capture that. And then for PyMel, you just tell it this node's attribute, give it to me. Right? So definitely a lot more readable. A little bit easier to get at, since you don't have to necessarily know exactly what you're dealing with. In order to get attributes, you can just kind of go, does this object have this attribute? Give it to me. Cool. And then just to show that it worked, let's print that out. You can see it. It's got the different values there. And if we want to see it, just to make sure that it is in fact changing, or I guess reading correctly, let's requery and print. Cool. So for the most part, it's just a different way about going about it. For kind of easier things, there's really not a lot of benefit of one over the other. You know, if you're just doing a few simple, straightforward, or even functional programs, you know, there's not a lot of value. But when you start getting into things that are a lot more complex, you're shuffling around a lot of data. PyMel can definitely be beneficial with its object orientation, instead of having to constantly type out all of this stuff. And if you look at the PyMel documentation, they have some pretty solid examples in there as well. But hope that helps.